Hey, what's going on? David Crosby died yesterday. We're gonna do a little tribute to David Crosby. I was a huge fan. I saw them originally. Actually, the first concert that I paid to go to, where I didn't get in somehow free, or didn't go with my parents, was Crosby and Nash in 1989 at a small little theater that was in the round with it's called the Westport Playhouse. There was a stage that slowly revolved in the middle with 20 rows of seats around it. And they had acoustic guitars. I think they had a piano. And David's voice was just angelic. Mixing, Graham Nash. Later I would see them with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Later I would see them with Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. But that first experience has changed my life. I was a junior in high school and went out and bought every Crosby, Stills, and Nash record, which led me down the Neil Young trail. And David Crosby was born in 1941 in Los Angeles. His father was a cinematographer. He actually won an Academy Award. David got into music. Certainly by the time rock and roll is kind of coming out, the Everly Brothers, he can tell that he can throw a third part harmony listening to Everly Brothers records, and it sounds good. David's a very smart guy. You can tell by listening to an interview that it's high intellect, highly intelligent, articulate. He's also very confident. While at the Troubadour, in Los Angeles, it was then called the Folk Den in 1964. He hears Gene Clark and Roger McGuinn singing in a corridor, just off by themselves, not on stage, and he comes in confidently and adds a third part harmony to their singing, and they decide to form a band called the Byrds. Again, David's got some connections in Hollywood because of his father. He uses some of these to get a manager. They acquire an acetate disc prior to Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man being released, and they record a version of Mr. Tambourine Man, but they put a rock and roll sensibility to it. Dylan's got these great lyrics. The Byrds are smart enough to make it danceable. In fact, Dylan ends up hearing a version, and Crosby says he immediately sees the wheels spinning in Dylan's mind that Dylan can now go electric. And he does go electric. Not very long after that, the Byrds released their debut album in April of '65. It's called Mr. Tambourine Man. It's got multiple Bob Dylan covers on it. It goes to number one. The Beatles, they're on a fast track. Okay, I mean the whole record comes out in June of '65. They do a European tour. They meet the Beatles. They meet the Rolling Stones. In fact, some of the first drug experiences of the Beatles are with David Crosby and the Byrds. David Crosby's now living up in Laurel Canyon. He claims to be the first rock star to live in Laurel Canyon, which becomes an enclave for artists from Frank Zappa to the Mamas and Papas to ultimately Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But the Byrds and the Monkees and Joni Mitchell are all up there. It's a hippie, almost like commune in the sense that they can go to each other's house. They could stay above the smog of LA by getting up into this canyon, up into the mountains. It's gorgeous. It's like being in the country. Yet you can dismount right onto the Sunset Strip and go to one of the clubs. Their second album, Turn, 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 comes out in October of '65. It's really almost the peak of that early period of the Byrds. The band is experimenting with marijuana. I'm sure David's experimenting with LSD at this point too. Drugs are creeping into the sound of their music. Again, that full album comes out in December of '65, Turn, Turn, Turn. 8 Miles High is recorded in January of '66. David's a writer on that song. It's psychedelic rock. We're now expanding on folk rock into psychedelic rock, and it's early. It's inspired by John Coltrane. McGuinn and Crosby are big jazz guys, and really throughout Crosby's career, if you listen to the solo material, there's this jazz sensibility in the music. And I really recommend, we're going to talk about the solo records. Gene Clark ends up leaving the band. Again, the Byrds are comprised of Michael Clark with an E on the end of Clark. Gene Clark, who's amazing, by the way. Chris Hillman, Roger McGuinn, who later changes his name to Jim McGuinn for some reason, and David Crosby. The third album, Fifth Dimension, comes out. Crosby pens the song What's Happening. Awesome song. The fourth album, Younger Than Yesterday, is released in 1967. It's got a seminal track called Everybody's Been Burned. Listen to that song off that fourth record, Everybody's Been Burned. You hear Crosby's voice there. He also has a single called Lady Friend and Why that comes off of that record. I recommend all the Byrds stuff, even after Crosby leaves, but we'll talk about that in a different show. Monterey Pop is in 1967. It's the first big pop festival where rock stars are playing. Hendrix, of course, burns his guitar at that show. The Who crash their instruments. Mamas and Papas play. The Byrds play, and so does Buffalo Springfield. During the Byrds performance, Crosby gets on stage and does a political rant about a scenario in the Kennedy assassination where he claims that there's multiple gunmen. He does this on stage. It pisses Chris Hillman off. It pisses Roger McGuinn off. They're already fighting. There's egos in this band. I mean, it's you're 2 years deep into a band and you can't get along. Also, later that night, so Buffalo Springfield was a band with Richie Fura, Neil Young, and Stephen Stills. Well, Neil Young quits the band few days before their performance. Who sits in on that set at Monterey but David Crosby? This pisses Hillman and McGuinn off also. So fast forward a couple months to October of 1967. David gets the boot. He gets kicked out of the band. They don't understand some of his songwriting. David wants to sing a song called Triad, which is about a menage a trois relationship. We'll talk about that song a little bit later. David's out of a job. David's living in Laurel Canyon. David's friends with Mama Cass. At a party at Mama Cass's house, he meets Stephen Stills. A few months later, or a few weeks or days, I'm not exactly sure, they meet Graham Nash. Graham Nash is in an English band called the Hollies. They've had songs like Bus Stop and big hits. The Hollies ultimately are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Graham Nash is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Hollies as well. David starts dating Joni Mitchell. David finds Joni Mitchell. Okay, she's from Canada. She's migrated down to Florida where David has met Mitchell, and he produces her first album. Not only does he produce her first album, but he introduces her to David Geffen. He introduces her to Elliot Roberts, who's a manager. He introduces her to the scene, and she becomes huge. They date. They end up breaking up. She famously goes out with Graham Nash, and around this time, David buys a 1947 schooner sailboat that was built. It's called the Mayan. Okay, this is a boat that was built in 1947 in Belize. This boat, he actually borrows 20 grand. Think about 20 grand back in 1969. Borrows 20 grand from Peter Tork from the Monkees. Says, listen, man, I need to buy this boat. I need to escape sometimes from fame. And from LA. So he uses this boat for the next 45 years. He writes songs on it. It becomes a place for him to escape. Crosby, Stills, and Nash forms in 1968. Okay, so after they hear, and they say that the band formed in 40 seconds. You're at Joni's house. In the kitchen, Stephen Stills David Crosby are singing and then plug in Graham Nash in that 3-part harmony changes music. And we're going to do a show. By the way, subscribe to my channel, like this video. We do lots of shows like this. David happens to be one of my favorite guys. We're getting into jazz and stuff like that too, but subscribe to my channel, okay? The band's formed. The band records their debut album, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. This is just unbelievable. This comes out in May of '69. Look at that inside. Look at those guys. May of '69. They do a gig at the Auditorium Theater in August of '69. Auditorium Theater is a really cool venue in Chicago that's still there. Their second gig is Woodstock. Neil Young joins them on stage at Woodstock, right? Now we got Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young a little bit. Joni Mitchell ends up writing a song called Woodstock that Crosby, Stills, and Nash do. And by 1970, they released their second album, Deja Vu. This is a Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young album. What is on here? And let's talk a little bit more about the first album. I apologize. This thing is incredible. I mean, it's got Guinevere on it. It's got Sweet Judy Blue Eyes on it. You know, it's just fantastic from start to finish. 49 Reasons or 49 Bye-Byes. This is unbelievable. As is this masterpiece. And here's the inside. Look at David there. Dallas Taylor is the drummer. Greg Reeves is the bass player. And it does state that here on the cover. Because they kind of wanted this to be a full-blown band. Not just for, you know, rock stars. Let's take a look at this. I should know all these songs. Obviously, Carry On, Teach Your Children, Almost Cut My Hair, great David song. Helpless, Woodstock, penned again by Joni Mitchell. Our House, Country Girl. Man, just fantastic music. You know, Wooden Ships, of course, is on that debut album. Did he write that on the Mayan? I'm sure he did. Just fantastic. They follow up Deja Vu with an amazing double live album called 4-Way Street. So 4-Way Street comes out in April '71. So we have '69 debut, 1970 Deja Vu, live album. Not only does this live album cover some of the songs on the first two records, but it gives each member of the band a chance to do some solo stuff. So what does David do? He sings the song Lee Shore. Lee Shore is one of my favorite songs. Again, written on the Mayan. You know, written on his boat where he can go and write songs. It's such a pretty song. I've covered that over the years, and I'll try to put a version of my cover song on that on this channel. Also, Triad. Triad's about, you know, he's in love with two women, and they're in love with him. And I don't really see, why can't we go on as three, right? Why can't we go on as three? It's not a conventional way to have a relationship in our world, but why not have a relationship with more than one person at the same time and everybody's good with it? David Crosby's girlfriend, Christine Hinton, dies in a car crash in September of '69. Okay. David's already experimenting with harder drugs, heroin, cocaine. When she dies, and she may have been the love of his life, and really, he still would suggest that he needs to keep busy, keep his mind off, and he goes into the studio with all of his friends. And when I mean all of his friends, wait till you see who's on this record. If I Could Only Remember My Name from 1971. This is incredible. Take a look at the inside and the people that work on this record. Okay. Joni Mitchell, Neil Young. Jerry Garcia is instrumental in this album. Phil Lesh. It's basically the Grateful Dead with David Crosby singing. And again, there's no real hits on here. I mean, Greg Rowley, Grace Slick, Jorma Kaukonen, Garcia, Paul Kantner, again from Jefferson Airplane, Bill Kreutzmann, Michael Shreve from Santana's band. This is an incredible album. Music is love. It's almost like meditation music. Everybody's saying that music is love. The song Laughing. You know, these aren't going to be radio hits. In fact, David Crosby says he's the only guy in CSN and Y that never had a hit. I mean, yeah, Guinevere's a huge song. Wooden Ship's a huge song. Carry On's a huge song, but they're not really radio hits. The cowboy movies on this, songs with no words and trees with no leaves. I mean, this is a beautiful record. I really recommend this record. Now, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young at this point is a stadium band. They're the first stadium rock band. You know, Led Zeppelin's creeping into some stadiums with other bands too. But Crosby, Stills, and Nash by 1972 into their 74 tour, they're the biggest band in the world. And it can be argued, again, Zeppelin's bigger. This album, Crosby and Nash are sometimes doing their own albums where it's just the two of them. I really recommend this record. This has a song called Page 43 on it. Listen to, if you get anything out of this video, listen to the song Page 43. He's talking about not letting life pass you by. You know, when the wine bottle is going around, grab it and take a sip of it. Unless you'll find that it'll pass you by. Life does pass us by. And you do want to grab onto things and try new experiences. And make up with friends and family that you haven't had a chance to make up with, maybe. The Wall song is on this record as well. It's really special. Again, they're in stadiums. They try to do a second album with Neil Young as Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. They even have a photo shoot for the album cover, and it's going to be called, Human Highway? Anyway, I don't know. It doesn't work out. Stills and Young do albums. Crosby and Nash are doing albums. In 1977, they get back and they do a proper Crosby, Stills, and Nash album. I don't have a prop for it, but I think it might be my favorite one. It's called CSN. Just the Song Before I Go is on it, right? Shadow Captain's on it. Anything at All. These are Crosby songs. Shadow Captain, Anything at All, and In My Dreams. Those are three of the prettiest songs that David ever did. God, listen to those. Dreams. I mean, I just love it so much. Big songs by Stephen Stills are on that, like Dark Star. God, that's they're on, the three of them are on the Mayan, okay? They're on the ocean on the cover. It's that one. It's called CSN from 77. David's struggling with heroin. David is struggling with cocaine. David's even freebasing cocaine. They try to do a follow-up album in 78. They can't get it done because David's too fucked up. He's met Janet, who ends up becoming his wife later, but she's on heroin and cocaine. In 1982, they do finally put out another album called Daylight Again. This is the album that has Southern Cross on it. Graham Nash has another big hit on it. I can't think of what the hell it's called right now. It doesn't matter. Delta is the only song that David Crosby writes on this album. David's not in a good way here, but Delta is beautiful. Listen to the song Delta. Through the 80s, there's video footage of them in 82 and 83 on stage, and David looks so paranoid. David looks so fat. David looks so unhealthy. Finally, he gets arrested in Texas with drugs on him. He's got a gun on him. And I should know this for the video, but he goes to federal prison. The FBI is looking for him. I think he gets arrested, gets released, and then he's a wanted man for some time. Finally turns himself into the FBI. And he is not only in federal prison, I want to say 9 months. I don't remember. It might have been over a year. He cuts all of his hair off. He's enormously fat. He's unrecognizable. And he has to kick heroin and crack in jail. And it's the best thing that ever happened to him. When he gets out of jail, let's just say 86, 87, he marries Janet. And he lives the remainder of his life, for all that we know, as a clean and sober guy. In 1988, Crosby, Stills, and Nash come back. They put out American Dream. Listen to the song Nightmare for the Generals off that. It's a David Crosby song. It's a good album. In 1990, they put out Live It Up. So these pants here are the pants that I wore to all my concerts in the 90s, and I would put the bands on as I would see them. So I saw the Beach Boys in 82. Steve Miller Band I snuck in for free. Many of you may remember that at the Muni. There's my my Bob Dylan. There's my Crosby and Nash. After a couple more concerts, I get my Crosby, Stills, and Nash first concert at the Muni. Dave Mason came out and sang Woodstock and played guitar on that. Neil Young represented here, right? What's on the back here? Oh, another Crosby, Stills, and Nash show in 92. I think I got this shirt at that concert in 92. Michael Hedges came out. Actually, David came out and sang with Michael Hedges. Look up Michael Hedges. He's on my 50 greatest guitar player list, too. Check that video. Subscribe to this channel. Like this video. Anyway, I wore these until I ran out of space with them. And Live It Up was not that good of an album. The song Arrows, which he did write with Michael Hedges, is on that. I recommend that. They do another album in 94 called After the Storm. The song Camera is pretty good off that record. I don't know that record as well. By 94, I'm listening to The Dead. I'm into Fish, and I'm into all kinds of other stuff, jazz. Crosby, Stills, and Nash gets back together in 99. They put an album out called Looking Forward. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. That album, the best songs on that album are Neil Young songs, but he writes a song with his son, James Raymond. So he has a son that enters his life again after not knowing his son. He didn't really know this child existed. At some point in the 90s, they meet, and he realizes that his son is artistic and is a musician. They write the song Stand and Be Counted, and that's on that Looking Forward Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album from 99. James Raymond, David Crosby composition. Listen to that sometime and let me know what you think. Solo record. So, of course, in 1971, he did If I Could Only Remember My Name, which I can't tell you how good. Again, don't be looking to rock on a Saturday night with this. Look, this is a Sunday morning record. This is a nice bottle of wine record by yourself in your own thoughts or with a loved one that wants to just love this so much. He doesn't put out another solo record until 89. Oh Yes I Can. The song Distances on that is really good. In 93, he does another solo album, 1,000 Roads. It's got a song he wrote with Phil Collins called Heroes. It's pretty good record. But then, late in his career, in fact, late in his career, by 2015 or so, he has a falling out with Graham Nash and Stephen Stills and Neil Young, and they basically never speak to him again. I think Stephen might have made up with him, but they really don't. So what does David do? With his son, James Raymond, they go in the studio, they put out Crosby in 2014. Song What's Broken, song The Clearing. These are great records. When I heard that album in 2014, I couldn't believe it. Because we know what happens to our rock stars as they age. They put shitty albums out. And they think they're, this is the best thing I've ever done, or the best thing I've done in 30 years, and it's crap. Not the case with David Crosby. Crosby is a great album. 2016, another great album called The Lighthouse. The song The Us Below. Things We Do for Love. Those are great songs. Set the next year, 2017, Sky Trails. The title track, Sky Trails, is incredible. Listen to that song. 2018, another record. Here, If You Listen. The song 1974 off that is very, very good. And then finally, in 2021, he releases For Free, which is a take off the song by Joni Mitchell called For Free. He does a cover of that on there. He does a song called River Rise on there. And then last year, finally, he does Live at the Capitol Theater. I recommend that. Yeah, there's classics on it from his glory days, but he has multiple songs from his last 5 years on that 2022 live album from the Capitol Theater. He is a 2-time Rock and Roll Hall induction member with the Byrds and Crosby, Stills and Nash. He should be in on a solo career. David Crosby meant a lot to me. He was the voice. He could have been an opera singer. He could have been a pop star, I think, in just a solo. He was troubled. I mean, once he had a falling out with those guys in the Byrds, McGuinn and Hillman, they never spoke to him again either. I know he's been sick for a number of years. He had 8 stents in his heart. He had diabetes. He had to have a liver transplant about 30 years ago because of hepatitis. I love you, David. This is a tough loss for the music world, but he's left so much. And the recent stuff, listen to that recent stuff. Peace out. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry this video is so long, but there's lots to talk about with this person. Okay, see ya.